Good day everyone. I'm Ria Balbas Alcantara and I'm from Santiago City, Isabela, Philippines. Currently, I'm the Division Head of Control Division under Audit Department of Algae Agro Industrial Solutions Incorporated. Comprise my team are 3 aggressive auditors. Control Division's mission is to provide fiscal and financial support to the company and its entire department by providing timely, precise, and complete information to significantly influence the company's decisions. Control Division imposes controls, recommendations, and financial audit for a growing agricultural supplies distributor having an area of operation nationwide. Algae Solution is primarily engaged in the distribution of farm inputs like fertilizers, hybrid and inbred corn and rice seeds, and agricultural chemicals. I choose the topic about power and politics because it plays a huge role in business, from governing how decisions are made to how employees interact with one another. Being in the middle management group who handles subordinates, it challenges me to influence the team on how they respond with positive or negative power in the workplace. Power and politics may directly influence who has the power and determine whether the overall culture of the workplace encourages productivity when properly utilized. To start, we have to know the differences between power, leadership, authority, and influence. When we look at power, we can associate it with many different aspects of the business world. We can look at authority, leadership, influence, and power on their own. I will discuss these 4 aspects and will try to show you the differences between them. Let's talk about views of different management. Knowing the types of management will help us frame out the difference in power, leadership, authority, and influence. This will give us a baseline to start from as we dive deeper into these 4 areas. Number 1, power, which is the ability to do something the specific way you want it done by any means necessary. One individual that comes to mind is Napoleon Bonaparte. He ruled his kingdom with an iron fist and had no problem going to war to defend it or to help it grow. His management was by power only. Next is leadership. A person that comes to mind is John Kennedy. President Kennedy challenged NASA to put a man on the moon and through leadership, convinced and motivated his team to make that happen. His accomplishments did not come by using power, but by using leadership and painting a vision for others to follow. Third, we have authority. Here, we do not need to isolate a great leader. We can just look at just about any policeman or fireman and say that they have authority. When a policeman tells you to do something, you usually comply as he is in a position of authority. The truth is, most managers are in position of authority. What differs is just how they use it. That is because with authority, a person has the right to give you an order or direction. Lastly, influence, which really is focused on having an impact on someone's character, their development, or even the way they think. Thus, for influence, we can look at a priest or an instructor, anyone whom you admire or idolize that has an informal position but has the ability to direct or change the viewpoint or character of another. Now, we already have the overview of the differences between power, leadership, authority, and influence. Now we go to the differences between leadership and power. If you observe a group of high school students making a project, you can easily tell the leader of the group through his actuations or the instructions. But is the leader also the most powerful? Traditionally, it has been shown that power comes with leadership. However, in some cases, it is power that leads to leadership. When you were a kid, your father and your mother have a great influence over you, and you try to imitate their social behavior to get praise from them. Similar is the case with your teachers. You try to do things that would bring praise for you. However, In all these cases, it is the derived authority that makes these people special and not because they are leaders. These are positions of authority and we obey and follow them out of fear and love. Power is something that is essential in politics. There are examples where novices have inherited extreme power and authority by virtue of being the son or daughter of a royalty or president or prime minister. Leadership, on the other hand, is a quality that an individual possesses right from his childhood or develops in the company of others. To differentiate, power is used as means of achieving goals, while leadership focuses on the goal achievement. Power requires follower dependency, while leadership requires goal compatibility with followers. Power used to gain lateral and upward influence, while leadership focuses influence downward. Power comes from position of authority, while leadership is an attribute that does not require power. Power terrorizes and makes people follow commands out of fear, while leadership inspires and makes followers. Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela had no power, yet they were great leaders and their followers were ready to do anything these men asked for. Now, we have to understand where power came from in the workplace. In 1959, French and Raven described 5 bases of power. Number 1 is legitimate. This comes from the belief that a person has formal right to make demands and to expect others to be compliant and obedient. Number 2, reward. This results from one person's ability to compensate another for compliance. Number 3, expert. This is based on one person's high level of skills and knowledge. Referent. This is the result of person's perceived attractiveness, worthiness, and the right to others' respect. This is number 4. 5th is coercive. This comes from the belief that a person can punish others for non-compliance. 6 years later, Raven added an extra power base. The 6th is informational. This results from a person's ability to control the information that others need to accomplish something. The basis of power is divided into 2 groups. We have the positional and personal. Among the positional power sources are legitimate, reward, coercive, and informational power. While included in the personal power sources are expert and referent powers. Let's clarify what creates dependency in power relationships. Probably, the most important aspect of power is that it is a function of dependency. The greater B's dependence on A, the greater is A's power in the relationship. Or, a person can have power over you only if he or she controls something you desire. This explains, for example, why most organizations develop multiple suppliers rather than give their business to only one. It also explains why so many of us aspire to financial independence, because financial dependence reduces the power that others can have over us. In purchase situation, the buyer typically has greater power than the seller as the seller depends on customers for their living. Much of the actions of salespeople is to address this imbalance, for example, by claiming product scarcity, offering discounts, and otherwise using psychological or social methods that give them greater power and control over the sale. So what creates dependency? Dependency is increased when the resources you control is important, scarce, and non-substitutable.
Presented in the exhibit are the list of 9 influence tactics and their contingencies. We have reviewed where power comes from. Now, we have to move to the topic of power tactics to learn how employees translate their power bases into specific actions. Both individuals and groups play politics in the organization for different reasons, like to safeguard their level of interest, to have a greater say in the process of decision making, or to have a greater autonomy over the allocation of limited resources. The most commonly used power tactics that helps to translate some power bases into specific actions are: Number 1, legitimacy, or pointing out one's authority to make a request or verifying that it is consistent with prevailing organizational policies and practices. Number 2, rational persuasion, using logical arguments and facts to persuade another that a considered result will occur. Number 3, inspirational appeal, arousing enthusiasm by appealing to one's values and beliefs. Number 4, consultation, asking for participation in decision making or planning a change. Number 5, exchange, promising some benefits in exchange for complying with the request. Number 6, personal appeal, appealing to feelings of loyalty and friendship before making a request. Number 7, ingratiation, getting someone to do what you want by putting that person in a good mood or getting him or her to like you. Number 8, pressure, seeking compliance by using demands, threats, or intimidation. And finally, coalition building, persuading by seeking the assistance of others by noting the support of others.
Another issue is how sexual harassment is about the abuse of power. The issue of sexual harassment got increasing attention by corporations and the media in 1980s because of the growing ranks of female employees, especially in non-traditional work environments. Legally, sexual harassment is defined as unwelcome advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. It is sexual harassment if it occurred whether comments or behavior in a work environment would probably be perceived and is perceived as hostile or abusive. It's also worth noting that individuals who occupy high-status roles like management positions sometimes believe that sexually harassing female subordinates is merely an extension of their rights to make demands on lower-status individuals. Because of power inequities, sexual harassment of one's boss, if there were no witnesses, is her word against his, typically creates the greatest difficulty for those who are being harassed. We go to the importance of political perspective. According to Wamsley and Sall, book published in 1973, page 18, politics is referred to the structure and process of the use of authority and power to affect definition of goals, direction, and more parameters of social system. This political orientation takes power, its distribution, dynamics, and control as central organizational issues. Politics is a fact of life in organizations. Isn't it possible for an organization to be political free? It's possible, but most organizations are made up of individuals and groups with different values, goals, and interests. This set up the potential for conflict over resources, unlikely. Departmental budgets, space allocation, project responsibilities, and salary adjustment are just a few examples of the resources about whose allocation organizational members will disagree. Politics in organization focuses on the use of power to affect decision-making in an organization, or on self-serving and organizationally unsanctioned behaviors. So, to answer the earlier question on whether or not it is possible for an organization to be politics-free, we can say yes, if all members of the organization hold the same goals and interests, if organizational resources are not scarce, and if performance outcomes are completely clear and objective. But take note, that doesn't describe the organizational world that most of us live in. There are primarily two distinct dimensions of politics. Number one is legitimate political behavior. It refers to the normal everyday politics, for example, complaining to your supervisor or bypassing the chain of command. Number two is illegitimate political behavior. It can be defined as behavior that violates the state rules of the game.
On the exhibit are the list of individual and organizational factors that stimulate political behavior. Factors contributing to political behavior are number 1, individual factors, example, personal traits or needs. And number 2, organizational factors, example, when organizational resources decline, resources change, low trust exists, high performance pressures, and the opportunity of promotion exists, equals political behavior is likely. At the individual level, researchers have identified certain personality traits, needs, and other factors that are likely to be related to political behavior. The higher self-monitor is more sensitive to social cues, exhibits higher level of social conformity, and is more likely to be skilled in political behavior than the low self-monitor. Individuals with an internal locus of control believe they can control their environment, are more prone to take a proactive stance, and attempt to manipulate situation in their favor. The Machiavellian personality, which is characterized by the will to manipulate and the desire for power, is comfortable using politics as means to further his or her self-interest. An individual's investment in the organization, perceived alternatives, and expectation of success will influence the degree to which he or she will pursue illegitimate means of political action. The more alternative job opportunities an individual has due to a favorable job market or the possession of scarce skills or knowledge, a prominent reputation, or influence contact outside the organization, the more likely he or she is risk illegitimate political action. Finally, if an individual has a low expectation of success in using illegitimate means, it is unlikely that he or she will attempt to do so. High expectation of success in the use of illegitimate means are most likely to be the province of both experienced and powerful individuals with polished political skills and experience and naive employees who misjudge their chances. When organizations downsize to improve efficiency, reduction in resources have to be made. Threatened with the loss of resources, people may engage in political actions to safeguard what they have. But any changes, especially those that imply significant reallocation of resources within the organization, are likely to stimulate conflict and increase politicking. Promotion decisions have consistently been found to be the most political in organization. The less trust there is within the organization, the higher the level of political behavior and the more likely that the political behavior will be of the illegitimate kind. So high trust should suppress the level of political behavior in general and inhibit illegitimate action in particular. Role ambiguity means that the prescribed behaviors of the employees are not clear. The practice of performance evaluation is far from a perfected science. The more that the organization uses subjective criteria in the appraisal, emphasize a single outcome measure, or allow significant time to pass between the time of action and its appraisal, the greater the likelihood that an employee can get away with politicking. The zero-sum approach treats the reward pie as fixed so that any gain one person or group achieves has to come at the expense of another person or group. Democratic decision-making allows subordinates to advise manager on decisions and that they should rely to a greater extent on group input into the decision process. In high-performance pressure, the more pressure that employees feel to perform well, the more likely they are to engage in politicking. Finally, when employees see that people on top engaging in political behavior, especially when they do so successfully and are rewarded for it, a climate is created that supports politicking.
Next topic would be about defensive behaviors. Organizational politics include protection of self-interest as well as promotion. Defense behavior is classified by their objectives. They are avoiding action, avoiding blame, and avoiding change. Sometimes, the best political strategy is to avoid action. That is, the best action is no action. Here are 6 popular ways to avoid action. Number 1 is overconforming. It is a rigid adherence to rules, policies, and precedents avoids the need to consider the nuances of a particular case. Number 2 is passing the buck. You transfer responsibility from the execution of a task or decision to someone else. Number 3 is playing dumb. This is a form of strategic helplessness. You avoid an unwanted task by falsely pleading ignorance or inability. Fourth is depersonalization. You treat other people as objects or numbers, distancing yourself from problems. Stretching and smoothing is number 5. Stretching refers to prolonging a task so that you appear to be occupied or busy. For example, you delay the turnover task to stay in the position for another 4 months. And lastly, stalling. This foot-dragging tactic requires you to appear more or less supportive publicly while doing little or nothing privately. Another defensive behavior is avoiding blame. You can try one of the following 6 tactics. Number 1 is buffing. This is a nice way to refer to covering your ear. Number 2 is playing safe. This encompasses tactics designed to evade situations that may reflect unfavorably on you. And number 3 is justifying. This includes developing explanations that lessen responsibility for a negative outcome and or apologizing to demonstrate remorse. Number 4, scapegoating. It is the classic effort to place the blame for a negative outcome on external factors that are not entirely blameworthy. Fifth is misrepresenting. This tactic involves the manipulation of information by distortion, embellishment, deception, selective presentation, or obfuscation. Finally, escalation of commitment. By further increasing the commitment of resources to a previous course of action, you indicate that the previous decision was not wrong. The third defense behavior is avoiding change, which is I consider as dreadful. Once we avoid change, we resist greater opportunity and responsibility. These people frequently use defensive behavior because they were personally threatened by resisting change and protecting turf, which means this is defending territory from encroachment by others. Let's move on to the 7 techniques for managing the impression one makes on another. Number 1 is conformity. It is agreeing with someone else's opinion in order to gain his or her approval. And number 2, excuses, an explanation of predicament, creating event aimed at minimizing the apparent severity of the predicament. And number 3 is apologies, admitting responsibilities for an undesirable event and simultaneously seeking to get a pardon for the action. Example, when you commit mistake with your boss, you say, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake on the report, please forgive me." Number 4 is acclaiming. Example, the new policy in our division was provided since I was hired. And 5th is flattery. It is complimenting others about their virtues in an effort to make oneself appear perceptive and likable. Number 6 is favors. Example is giving a small present to your boss on her special day. It might be a small cake to do or as a sign of gratitude. And lastly, association. It is enhancing or protecting one's image by managing information about people and things with which one is associated. Example would be, a newly hired staff in your department would tell his manager, "What a coincidence! Your brother and I was in the same basketball team in college." The evidence that impression management behavior works. In one study, for instance, interviewers felt that those applicants for a position as customer service representative who used IM techniques perform better in the interview, and they seem somewhat more inclined. In the short run, extensive use of defensiveness may well promote an individual's self-interest, but in the long run, it more often than not becomes a liability. This is because defensive behavior frequently becomes chronic or even pathological over time.
The exhibit illustrates a decision tree to guide ethical actions. The first question you need to answer addresses self-interest versus organizational goals. Ethical actions are consistent with the organization's goals. Spreading untrue rumors about the safety of a new product introduced by your company in order to make that product's design team look bad is unethical. However, there may be nothing unethical if a department head exchanged favors with her division's purchasing manager in order to get a critical contract processed quickly. The second question concerns the right of other parties. If the department head described in the previous statement went down to the mail room during her lunch hour and read through the mail directed to the purchasing manager with the intent of getting something on him, so he'll expedite your contract, she would be acting unethically. She would have violated the purchasing manager's right to privacy. The final question that needs to be addressed relates to whether or not the political activity conforms to standard of equity and justice. The department head that inflates the performance evaluation of a favored employee and deflates the evaluation of a disfavored employee, then uses this evaluation to justify giving the former a big raise and nothing to the latter, has treated the disfavored employee unfairly. Powerful people, for example, can become very good at explaining self-serving behaviors in terms of the organization's best interest. Those who are powerful, articulate, and persuasive are most vulnerable because they are likely to be able to get away with unethical practices successfully.
Organizational politics may threaten employees, increase stress, decrease job satisfaction, increase turnover, or even reduce performances. Regardless of level in the organization, some people are just significantly more politically astute than the others. Lower-ranking employees who lack the power bases and the means of influence needed to benefit from the political game perceive organizational politics as source of frustration and indicate lower satisfaction. But higher-ranking employees who are in the position to handle political behavior and benefit from it don't tend to exhibit this negative attitude. While there are no absolute right answer in problem solving, executive finds his power base enhanced and his ability to take risks increased. With proper usage of power, we could maintain harmony inside the organization, especially in times of decision-making that would benefit the whole. As a final message on how important power and politics Qatar 1985 states that the challenges faced by strategic leaders in implementing complex and long-range consequential decisions demands that they be sophisticated with respect to issues of leadership, power, and influence. The changes that are shaping the nature of work in today's complex organizations require that we develop the political will, expertise, and personal skills to become more flexible, innovative, and adaptive. Without political awareness and skills, we face the inevitable prospect of becoming immersed in bureaucratic infighting, parochial politics, and destructive power struggles, which greatly retard organizational initiative, innovation, morale, and performance. And that ends my discussion. Thank you, and to God be the glory.